Metagross debuted in the Generation 3 Pokemon games, where it saw immediate success in the competitive scene. Metagross has been a top-tier staple since the beginning, and that will not be changing anytime soon. It's fitting that this supercomputer-themed Pokemon feels like it comes from the future. In a generation with a pretty reasonable power level overall, where nothing feels too overwhelming, Metagross is the one Pokemon that is capable of powering through teams with brute force. With fantastic defensive and offensive capabilities, Metagross provides a huge amount of value in a single team slot. This is one of the few Pokemon in Gen 3 that can fit on absolutely any team at all, no matter its pace or game plan. Some even argue that Metagross is the best Pokemon in the game, stronger than the other two contenders, Tyranitar and Skarmory, and I can't deny that they have some convincing arguments. Let's take a look at how Metagross dominates Gen 3 OU, all the different ways it can be used, and the impact it has on the format as a whole. But first, is your refrigerator running? No. But mine is. Look at it go. The Fridge is my all-new podcast where I interview fellow creators. My first guest was YouTuber LRXC, who makes fantastic videos about Gen 3's Battle Frontier. Check out episode 1 on YouTube in the link below. Thank you. The most fundamental qualities of Metagross are excellent on their own. Steel is one of the best defensive types in the game, with its many useful resistances, especially to rock and normal type attacks, and crucial immunities to poison and sandstorm chip damage. Psychic as a secondary type is very useful too. Although you're now neutral to bug and dark type attacks unlike other steels, you are also neutral to fighting type attacks, which is a lot more relevant as one of the most popular attacking types, and a form of coverage against steels. Metagross has fantastic stats, most notably that massive 135 base attack and 130 base defense. Every other stat is pretty solid too. 95 base special attack is nothing to sneeze at, and considering how bulky this thing is, 70 base speed is also quite respectable. While Metagross is mostly used as a physical attacker, this balanced stat distribution allows for a lot of set variety. Metagross also has a really good ability, Clear Body. This makes Metagross completely immune to having its stat stages lowered. Intimidate is a very common strategy in Gen 3 OU as a way to weaken physical attackers, but Metagross is completely unaffected. What really brings Metagross together though is its incredible move pool. Meteor Mash is the scariest stab attack in the entire game when used on Metagross. This move has 100 base power, which by Gen 3 standards is well above average. Other high power physical moves in the game like Earthquake or Superpower aren't very spammable because of type immunities that can punish them. Mega Horn is a powerful move with no immunities to worry about, but it can be stopped relatively easily thanks to Skarmory's ×4 bug resistance and intimidating flying types, stomaching the move well. You wouldn't think of Steel as a particularly strong attacking type, but on Metagross this is one of the most spammable attacks in the game. 85 accuracy is a drawback, but it has a secondary effect that makes up for it, a 20% chance to raise your attack. Even without that attack raise kicking in, a choice band Meteor Mash hits really hard, even against resistances. But when that attack raise does proc, you can start to defy logic and deal absurd damage to anything in front of you, no matter what it is. Thanks to Metagross's bulk and common entry points against popular Pokemon, it's not hard to find opportunities to click Meteor Mash and give yourself those chances for that attack raise. The other most important move in Metagross's toolkit is Explosion, a move that I have talked about ad nauseum in Gen 3 for how powerful it is. Explosion has a massive 250 base power, and a defense halving effect to amplify that damage further. And on top of that, it also denies your enemy from taking a turn, since in Gen 3, if a Pokemon faints, the enemy can't act. Metagross is the most powerful user of Explosion in the game, thanks to its massive attack stat and Clear Body to even prevent being intimidated. A Choice Band boosted Explosion from Metagross is famously able to one-hit KO the most popular Skarmory set. And even without a Choice Band, this Explosion will instantly KO just about any non-resisted defensive wall you have, no matter how bulky. This combo of Meteor Mash and Explosion is deadly. In most games, Metagross will trade up thanks to the sheer amount of offensive pressure it applies with Meteor Mash, which will at least earn you some good damage, if not a KO or two, and after that it can explode and trade with almost anything. Explosion can be outplayed of course by switching into a ghost type, but Gengar will just faint instantly if the Metagross uses Meteor Mash instead, making this really risky. Even alternative ghosts like Misdreavus and Dusclops are greatly threatened by Meteor Mash. The threat of a Metagross Explosion creates serious mind games and can be used massively to your advantage. Metagross often forces in defensive walls like Skarmory, Suicune, or Swampert, and exploding against these to enable teammates is a very common strategy and a popular way to blow through the enemy's defensive core. These two moves are the cornerstone of Metagross's power, but this Pokemon also has amazing complementary coverage with Earthquake and Rock Slide to perfectly round things out. Metagross not only has these fantastic offensive qualities, it provides extremely important defensive value to teams as well. One of the most important boxes you need to tick on a Gen 3 team is some sort of plan against Tyranitar and Aerodactyl, the two most powerful rock-type attackers that are commonly used together. Metagross is the most popular alternative to Swampert for this role. While Metagross does not have that amazing water-ground defensive typing, and is unfortunately weak to ground, which can be exploited, Metagross is bulky enough with that high defense to withstand a Dragon Dance Tyranitar and operate as a solid check to it. You are able to live a +1 Earthquake, and you can KO most Tyranitars back with a huge stab Meteor Mash. Protect enhances your defensive value further, allowing you to chip heal and scout what enemy choice band users lock into. Metagross is very solid against Aerodactyl when it's running Protect. If they lock into Rock Slide or Double Edge, they are severely punished by a Metagross entering the field. Metagross is a really solid check against Snorlax too, who can be a rough matchup for certain teams. Normal resistance comes in handy here, as does the threat of big Meteor Mashes and Explosion. Since Metagross can tick all these important boxes while also generating offensive pressure and momentum, it is an extremely common choice on offensively leaning teams. Swampert may be sturdier defensively, but it is not as threatening or fast-paced as Metagross is. That doesn't mean Metagross is restricted to just hyper-offensive teams though. Even passive and defensive teams appreciate what Metagross offers. Exploding against specific enemies and trading with them can be really advantageous for defensive teams too, and give you a huge advantage in the long term. Metagross also has a lot of set variety. Agility is an amazing option on Metagross, a boost that grants a 2-stage increase to speed. With just one agility boost, you can outrun the two fastest relevant Pokemon in the format, Aerodactyl and Jolteon, and you threaten to one-hit KO both of them very easily. With agility, Metagross can turn from a slow, bulky attacker into a late-game cleaner and win condition. This is where Clear Body really comes in handy. Intimidate spam is a common form of counterplay against enemy Dragon Dance sweepers or fast cleaners, but not against agility Metagross. Most sets run agility, Meteor Mash, Earthquake, and Explosion, often aiming to earn 1 or 2 KOs, then explode. But some sets will drop Explosion in favor of Rock Slide for more coverage. These sets aim to end the game with Metagross more directly, threatening enemies like Moltres, Zapdos, and Gyarados that would have otherwise invited an explosion. Metagross can even be a solid mixed attacker. With 95 base special attack and stab psychic, you can dish out some respectable damage, especially against the Pokemon you usually invite in. Even without any attack investment, a stab Meteor Mash is going to be threatening to enemies like Blissey and Snorlax, just off your base stats alone. So mixed Metagross is tough to switch into. Swampert, your most common switch in, is now threatened greatly by options like Stab Psychic and Hidden Power Grass. Skarmory is also quite vulnerable to Hidden Power Fire and Thunder Punch. Blissey and Snorlax can't wall you very well either, because of Meteor Mash. And all these Pokemon are a little bit afraid of that explosion, which also hits really hard without any attack investment. Gengar sometimes uses Will-O-Wisp against Metagross to halve its physical damage, but when you're running Psychic, even Gengar is scared. Mixed Metagross can be an amazing option on special offense teams, providing that valuable rock resistance and also really improving your matchup against Snorlax, who can be tough for the archetype sometimes. Having some form of physical damage output can give you alternative game plans if trapping or pressuring their special wall doesn't work out. An explosion always comes in handy. I love and hate Metagross. Meteor Mash attack raise in particular is a common point of frustration in this format. There's always variance in Pokemon, but this is a secondary effect that tends to proc the most on defensive switch-ins to resistances, a scenario that should be solid counterplay. Even an unexpected crit or status ailment or flinch feel less devastating than that attack raise. That boost to attack will remain until the Metagross switches out, and you're not only going to lose your most important defensive Pokemon now, you can't exactly switch out to anything else either. At least a crit is a temporary big boost in damage that you can heal back up from, but that mash attack raise chance can swing games massively and feel tough to navigate against when it does happen. However, despite that, everything else about Metagross is fantastic. Metagross has a huge amount of set variety with defensive and offensive tools. This Pokemon rewards creativity and optimization, and most of the time it creates fun and dynamic gameplay. Metagross is a cornerstone of offensive strategies in Gen 3 OU, and an amazing way to punish greedier teams and break through defense, which is very important. Overall, I like what Metagross adds to this format. No competitive game is perfect, and that variance is something I can accept.